I'm Derek.
And I'm Noah, and you're listening to A Bite Of,
where we take our current favorite pop culture obsession and enjoy it one nibble at a time.
Yeah, season 2.
This is season 2.
Yeah, season 2.
It's cuckoo crazy. I can't believe it.
Yeah. Starting a new thing.
New piece of pop culture.
Yeah, we left Twilight. We're done with it.
Goodbye, Forks.
Yeah.
So long.
Yeah, until she writes another one.
See you never.
But one of our favorite properties is coming back for season 2.
Yes.
Aptly so. Our season 2, their season 2.
Oh, I thought you were talking about us.
Both.
Yeah.
So The Haunting of Hill House was amazing. If you have not watched that, you should. It's on Netflix. And season 2 is coming out with The Haunting of Bly Manor. I keep saying Blythe, and that was a lot of work to not say Blythe.
The Haunting of Blythe Denner.
Yeah, right. But so season 2 isn't out yet. It comes out October 9th, and season 2 is based on a book.
Right. So it's a novella by Henry James called The Turn of the Screw. And so we thought the way that we would do the season is we would give you our thoughts sort of like we did Midnight Sun, where we take the book first, and then we're going to go through the whole season of season 2 with Bly Manor, but we're starting with the story itself that it was based on.
Right. Yeah, give you a little deep dive, a little look into the source material before the show comes out. And the first season it's not based on the same works of the same person, but it was based on a book as well.
Right. So that was The Haunting of Hill House, which is Shirley Jackson. And it was very loosely based on it.
Right.
Like, very loosely. Like, they took the house and a name of the character, and they were like, this is it.
Right. Yeah.
But when we get to the show, when we start taking a bite of the actual season of the show, we'll kind of go into our thoughts on The Haunting of Hill House and why we like it so much. And for this, I think we're just both fans of horror. I'm definitely a fan more of spooky things, like ghosts and apparitions and things like that. So this is totally up my alley.
Yeah.
I love this stuff.
Yeah, I think it's funny that both the first season and this season, not our seasons, but of The Haunting, so we'll say for
this is getting confusing.
Yeah. They adapted works that were books first, but made into movies and shows over and over again. And then they took it and they're doing their own adaptation. So The Turn of the Screw is the same way.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting that it's an anthology series, but I feel like their criteria is, okay, has it been made into a movie at least twice?
Right. One from like the 60s, one from the 90s, and now. So let's talk a little bit about the history of The Turn of the Screw. So I thought we would start with the author Henry James. So he was born in 1843, and he spent his youngest years actually in Manhattan. So they say that he was a quiet observer who loved to read. And then after their time in the city, they went to Europe for a few years before returning back to the States, where they lived sort of in the New England area. So then he went to Harvard, and he had his first short story published when he was only 19.
Wow.
And then he continued being published from there. And then in his 20s, he was really known for his short stories. And then he found lots of success and decided that he was done with America, and he moved to Europe. And it's actually like a well-known fact about him. Like, he left America, he was an expatriate, and he became a British citizen.
I mean, I wish I could do that sometimes.
Right. for the high tea. So he stays there. He lived in France and England mostly, and then he found a lot of success with his novels, which focus mainly on the theme of the innocence and exuberance of the new world in clash with the corruption and wisdom of the old. So like lots of political, lots of sort of commentary.
So that's interesting, though, with authors that usually do that. They'll come out with novellas, like the short stories, and they'll be really different from what they normally produce or what they're more well known for.
Well, that's what's so odd about this. Well, it's really funny. So he has all the success, right? Writing all these books and these novellas, and everybody loves him, and he's like this bright mind. So he's like, you know what? I'm fantastic. I'm going to start writing for the stage.
Ooh.
So he writes this first piece for the stage, and it's like, okay. And then his second piece that he writes for the stage, apparently after the first performance, the audience booed it.
Oh, no.
Because it was so bad.
I mean, know your strengths, dude.
Right? Don't get too big for your britches.
Yeah.
Just like know what's up and do that. You're doing so well. Why? Why test the waters? So then it kind of like that moment of like that failure is what led him to writing The Turn of the Screw.
Ooh,
yeah.
interesting.
So it was kind of like he had this bad moment, and then he decided to sort of go into these like shorter stories, and then this one sort of really haunting tale. And so as a novella, it was actually first published serially in Collier's Weekly, and then later in its collected form. And it's actually considered one of the world's most famous ghost stories. Ooh. And it's been adapted a number of times, like we said before. Most recently, there was actually a film this year called The Turning, starring Finn Wolfhard, the kid from Stranger Things. Mm-hmm. And now here we are again, coming out in October with The Haunting of Bly Manor. Damn it.
No houses in this
no
one.
houses.
It's a manor.
It's a manor.
Yeah, and I want to see the movie. I haven't seen the movie only because the lead girl in it is from Black Mirror, from that San Junipero.
Your favorite.
I love that. It's so sad and it's so nice and so good. She's a good actress.
But what's really interesting is that there's been like 3 or 4 other sort of The Turn of the Screw or The Turning. Like there's one that came out, like I said, in the 60s. And there was like a BBC special that came out only a couple of years ago. That was a TV miniseries. So it's been adapted quite a few times.
It was also an opera.
Oh, cool.
They put it on stage as an opera.
That's awesome.
I don't know how that works, but I
want to see spooky opera.
Right.
That sounds fun.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting that it's kind of coming back more into the sort of TV, quote unquote, way on Netflix. And I'm really interested to see what they do.
Mm-hmm. I'm super. Knowing from the first season, The Haunting of Hill House, and knowing the source material and the other movies that came out, they adapted it really well. I felt like they got a lot of the themes. Like they changed it a lot from the book. Like, there wasn't a doctor that took these people there to experience the haunting. It was centered around a family, but it was such a well done story that when they adapt stuff like that, I'm fine with it. If it's both of the works are good on their own, but they complement each other, it's fine.
I think it's always interesting though, like when they say based on,
right?
Like what does that word mean?
Just
based?
the name.
Just the name. They're like by based we mean we picked up the book and then put it back down.
Right. So that's why we're excited to do it this way, because we're giving you the source material, where this came from, and then we can compare and contrast.
Well, that's my fear though, is I'm going to be like, well, in the story that didn't happen.
Right.
You know, I tend to get hung up on book to movie adaptations. I think because I'm just such a book person,
right,
that I'm like always very loyal to the book.
Right. Yeah.
But I'll try my best to just be open.
Yeah. So this novella, I should say, this short story, is the chapters are very short. So when you see the episode titles, episode chapter 8 through 17, it's because they're very short.
Let me tell you. I mean, so this was written in the late 1800s, right? So the language is a little intense.
Yeah.
But I love how speedy these chapters are, especially compared to our, vampiric Lothario from season 1, who had a lot to say about nothing.
Yeah, a lot to say about thinking. Yeah.
Blood. So before we go on into our conversation, we always have to say spoiler alert. So this time around, I think it's really important to say spoiler alert because not only are we going to be doing spoilers, obviously, for The Turn of the Screw, the story, but we don't know what the heck they're going to be doing in Bly Manor. So we might be giving away heavy spoilers for the upcoming Netflix series. So I guess tread with caution?
Yeah. Well, hopefully it's going to be like The Haunting of Hill House, where it's just the name and just the people.
Bly Manor. Done.
Right. It looked like from the trailer there was dolls moving. So far, there's been no dolls, what we've read.
Yeah.
So
I mean, there's barely kids in the book.
Right. Be careful.
We're starting with, so this is really interesting. So the book has, I think, 24 chapters, but it also has like this weird prologue that's not called a prologue. It's just titled The Turn of the Screw.
Right. It's a little confusing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're starting with the prologue. So let's get into it. Let's take a bite of The Turn of the Screw.
Yeah.
Woo!
Yeah.
So the prologue is Turn of the Screw. A bunch of weirds sit in a house and wait for a creepy manuscript to arrive. Alas, much jaunty libations.
Right. Yeah. So typically, these old horror stories, a lot of them take place with dinner parties, or there's a seance and the town comes to, some manor to see it. So it starts off very formulaic, what we're used to now. I don't know about back then, how that was more used to, but so yeah, a bunch of people come Christmas Eve for a dinner party, and this guy, Douglas, is essentially...
Dougie.
Yeah, he says that I have this manuscript from this governess, and, you will be terrified. It's odd.
But it's really funny, though, because he's like they're all just kind of like sitting around, had dinner, and he's like, "Oh, you think y'all think a scary story with one kid is scary?
Try two.
Watch. Right. Guess what? I'm going to tell you a scary story." And like, it's really funny throughout this whole prologue. There's always these interjections by the ladies, and they're like, "Oh, please,
yeah,
yes, please."
Yeah, there's a moment where like they're asking what makes it scary, what makes your story better than what is being told, and one woman is like, "For sheer terror." And then he says, for dreadfulness. And she's like, "Oh, how delicious," she cried. It's like, whoa, yeah, same.
He always takes these very dramatic walks up to the fireplace, and he'll kick a log, and he'll be like, "I'll send for the key," or "I'll send the key." And they're like, "Yes!" And
right. They're all waiting for this manuscript.
And then it's like the next night, he's like, "I sent the key." And they're like, "Whoa!" Right. It's this funny thing of being like, he's like, it's going to be so scary,
right?
But I didn't send for it yet.
But we're also finding these little clues about where it came from, who wrote it, and also the narrator isn't Douglas; it's some other guy.
Yeah,
and so he says, "Well, Douglas says that she sent me the pages in question before she died." So right away,
she's been dead 20 years.
Right, the person that wrote the manuscript, the governess, she's already dead. So, and we don't know why, we don't know what happened. And then we also find out from the narrator, this unknown narrator so far, that he says, "Poor Douglas," before his death. So also, Dougie is dead.
It's just a tragic tale.
Right.
Everybody's dead. It's terrible.
Right. We're finding out these things in a weird kind of way, where it's being told as if it's happening then, but also the narrator's talking in the past tense.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like, I don't know. It's this interesting sort of literal thing that's happening where these are things that you would normally find out through the story, right? But we have this introduction where Douglas is saying there's a governess. Mm-hmm. She goes to this house where an uncle left people to care for his niece and his nephew who were left in his care, and he's not even there.
Right, yeah. Weird.
And then there's a woman who's like the head of the house, Mrs. Gross. And then there's all these other people. There's a cook, a housemaid, a dairy woman, an old pony, an old groom, and an old gardener, all likewise thoroughly respectable.
So there's a lot of old things.
There's a lot of old things, and Douglas needs us to know this. Right. So it's just an interesting sort of like plot device to have this person like being like, these are all of the characters in the play. And now here's the play.
I'm excited to see how the old pony and the whatever an old groom is, how that plays into this.
Yeah, I tried to do a Google search. Granted, it was a very weak one. It was like quite lackluster. I was like, what is a groom in like an old house or a Victorian manor? And it was like, are you a groom? Can't wait to get married? I was like, oh no, that's not what I meant.
Yeah.
Forget it.
Yeah. And then we also find out that the nanny prior to this governor had also died, even before the story starts.
Yeah.
So we're finding out all these people are dead. You know, the person before the governess that wrote this manuscript that this Douglas guy is waiting for, she died. And we don't know why. Mm-hmm. They don't say why. Mm-hmm. So I guess we'll find out throughout the whole thing.
And just as a note, Noah and I did some research to look to see what like the phrase "turn of the screw" means. Mm-hmm. And it means to make something worse.
Right. Right.
So if it first starts off and he says the thing, he's like, "Oh, you think a story with one child?" He's like, "Well, how about two? That'll turn the screw."
Right.
He's like, so when you're turning a screw, it's tight, it's scary. You're pressing more into something. It's making it worse.
Yeah, you're distressing the screw itself and also whatever you're screwing into.
Yeah.
Like you're screwed.
End. Yeah. So it's like, I don't know if the governess is the screw and this thing she's screwing into is the manor and they're both screwed.
Gross.
Because of the screwing? Oh, no.
Yeah, and we also find out that this Douglas guy had the hots for the governess.
It took a turn.
Yeah.
Of the screw.
Yeah.
Got him.
Right, and then that leads us into the actual chapter.
Right. So then we go to chapter 1. So the governess arrives at Bly and obsesses over Flora and them big mirrors.
Right. Yeah, so she gets to Bly Manor, and that's where it starts. She's getting there, and she's noticing that she's treated very well. That she has like the best bedroom. She has all this stuff. Like she's a governess, I guess. That's what her title is, but it's as if she's the head of the house now because the dude that hired her is like, bye. Like you can handle everything. You can sign all the papers. You can order all the stuff you want. Like just have fun. Take care of these kids.
Yeah, when she gets to her bedroom, she says, the large, impressive room, one of the best in the house, the great state bed, as I almost felt it, the full figured draperies, the long glasses in which, for the first time, I could see myself from head to toe. Right. So she's like, damn, look at that body.
That's sad.
It is sad. We figure right in the late 1800s, maybe you couldn't afford a giant mirror to check out your whole damn outfit in.
Yeah, you couldn't go to Target.
OOTD.
You couldn't go to Target and buy a $10 7-foot mirror.
Exactly. So she's like so impressed by everything. And of course, when she gets there, so there's Mrs. Gross, who's like the head of the house, who kind of becomes her companion. And then there's Flora. So Flora's the little girl.
Right.
And there's also a brother, but he's away at school, Miles.
He's not introduced yet.
No. No. I'm having trouble kind of figuring out how old Flora is.
I got the sense that she was at least under 10.
Right.
And maybe like 7.
So they say she's in a high chair and a bib when they're eating dinner. How old were kids with bibs?
Yeah, but I don't know for sure, but I feel like especially back then, even when they were still pretty young, they were still in, because the chairs were so big, they didn't want to mess up their nice outfit, so they still had bibs. I mean, even adults wore bibs, so it is still hard to tell.
I'm wearing a bib these days.
He is. Yeah, so I don't know. Under 10. Let's just say that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
She's not in school yet.
Right. So she doesn't go away. She's just at the house and she's like gorgeous. She's blonde. She has rosy cheeks and the governess is obsessed with her.
Yeah. She's excited for her to love her.
Yes.
To get to know her. So there's also this funny way of them saying outdoors. It was out of doors.
Out of doors.
It was out -of doors.
Bringing it back.
I don't know if that literally meant outdoors, but she was talking about being outside. So it was a really weird way to say.
I mean, I guess you were literally out of the doors.
Like you don't have any doors.
Oh, we're done. We're out of doors. Sold out.
Right.
No more doors.
Yeah,
so sorry.
That's the setup. She gets there. It describes the house, describes how angelic and beautiful that Flora is the most beautiful girl she's ever seen. And the Mrs. Gross is there. They form a little bond.
And there is just like a tiny little creepy thing that happens where she's in her bedroom and she said, there had been a moment when I believed I recognized faint and far the cry of a child.
Right. Yes. And she knew it wasn't Flora.
Yeah.
It was an infant. They specifically said infant. So I'm assuming that Flora's not an infant.
No, she's 28, as we decided. Still wearing a bib.
Right. Yeah. So that was the first creepy thing.
Yeah. Just a little sliver of creep. Just a creepy, teeny creepy thing. And then we go to chapter 2. The governess and Josie Mrs. Grossi receive a letter that the little hellion has been kicked out of school.
So the little boy.
So it's really interesting. So she's kind of like hearing things about Miles, the little boy, and that he's away at school. And then they get this letter that says that he's bad.
Right. And Mrs. Gross doesn't believe that.
Right.
Nobody believes that, essentially.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is that he's being sent home, and not just for the holidays. They're saying he's not allowed back.
Right. He's like expelled from school. Apparently, the weird thing was that the letter didn't say what he did. It was just, he's awful. He's no longer back here.
Yeah.
And she brings the letter to Mrs. Gross, and she's like, I will not have this. This is not true. There's no way. You'll see when you meet him. And so, I mean, the governess is, okay, I guess, yeah, I believe you. If he's anything like this angel Flora, then of course.
She floats in.
Yeah.
Oh,
right.
You rang.
Right.
I also I thought it was funny that when she gets the letter, it's actually the letter from the school inside a letter from her employer sent to her.
Right. It's weird.
So he was sent the letter, but he's like, I'm not dealing with this. This is her job. So then he sends her the letter that Miles is coming home.
And we don't know why he's so disconnected.
That's true.
We don't know why he hired this woman to take care of the entire house.
Yeah.
And the kids.
Right. And he's just gone.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. And I don't know, do we know what happened to their parents at this point?
They're dead.
They're just dead.
Yeah, the Mrs. Gross had said that they didn't make it. They died. Mm-hmm. Then they just fell into the next of kin, which was
the uncle.
Yeah. And then we get this weird interaction with the governess and Mrs. Gross, and she's asking her about the person that was previously had her position. Mm-hmm. And she asked her, did she die here? And she said, Mrs. Gross said, no, she went off. Went off to die? Which is literally what the governess said. And then Mrs. Gross said, she was taken ill, you mean, and went home? Mm-hmm. So it's weird that Mrs. Gross won't give her all the information. It's one of those things, a typical horror story, where it's like, no, this person died. Well, what did they die of? Oh, I can't talk about that. It's like, well, why?
Just tell me. I thought we were in this together, Mrs. Grouse.
Right.
She also says, the last governess, she was also young and pretty. Almost as young and almost as pretty, miss. Even as you.
Yeah, setting her up. Right. Yeah, it's so odd.
We have an archetype that we like to fill this spot, and then we kill them.
Right. I mean, that's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah, you fit the bill. There you go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's it. So there's just like sort of, again, chapter 2, sort of this setup that Miles is coming back and he's not great. And then there's like this little drop about the governess, and our new governess is just kind of like, all right.
Right. Cool.
That's fine. I'm good. You're good. We're good.
Mm-hmm.
So chapter 3, Miles returns from school. On a walk one evening, a mysterious figure has a stare down with the governess.
Yes. So Miles is back.
Mm-hmm.
She has to go pick him up, and she falls head over heels.
Mm-hmm.
Because the second she sees him, just like Flora, this is the most beautiful child ever. Of course he could do no wrong. This letter is cocky.
Duty.
Right.
Yeah, it says, what I then and there took him to my heart, for was something divine that I have never found to the same degree in any child. His indescribable little air of knowing nothing in the world but love.
Yeah.
It's weird how obsessed, she is with them.
I'm starting to get the feeling, and we'll get it to it a little later because there's something that I'll point out, but I don't think the governess is all there.
Oh,
I think there's
cray?
I think she's a little crazy.
Oh.
And I'll point it out a little later, but there's little tidbits like that where but it's also weird because even Mrs. Gross is, engrossed with the kids.
Yeah.
And so
it seems like the manor itself almost it takes them over.
Right.
I believe in the introduction it says they become infatuated.
Right.
When they get there. There's something about that place that just kind of hypnotizes you and makes you're drunk
right
on Bly Manor.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're starting to see this. You become obsessed with the inhabitants, you become obsessed with the place, and she's completely falling under the spell of the manor.
Right. Yeah.
Or Flora's just a witch.
That'd be awesome. Yeah. I'm here for it.
Twist.
Yeah, and then we get she has these moments that she talks about. She loves the kids and she loves her job, but then during twilight, the moment in between where they're not in bed, but they're getting ready and they're quiet, that she goes on her walks. She goes on the walks on the grounds on the outside. And as she's going back to the manor, she sees on this balcony this figure, this man. She can tell it's a man, but it's staring at her just very intently. And she does nothing. She just stands there because, what else do you? I would be there's not supposed to be somebody up there.
Yeah.
I've not seen this person with the staff. Who is that person?
And it's really creepy because when they're having this stare down, she says, the rook stopped cawing in the golden sky and the friendly hour lost for the minute all its voice. Mm-hmm. So as she's making eye contact with this figure, everything around her goes silent.
Right. It's the only thing that matters is this person staring at her.
Exactly. And then there's this, it's as silly as it sounds when you're reading it. It's so creepy because he's staring at her and then he continues to move along the balcony, but he won't break eye contact from her.
Yeah, it's he's like a pitcher where his eyes are always following her.
Yes.
Yeah, he's walking back and forth and he's just not lost eye contact.
And she's kind of just frozen.
Right. I would be too.
It's scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially as they describe him. Oh, one of the big descriptors, which like means something, he doesn't have a hat on.
Right.
He's wearing
it's
no
chilly.
hat.
It is chilly. How dare you?
It's like he's a lowly creature. He wasn't wearing a hat.
Yeah, and we'll get into it in the next chapter, but she has a gentleman. No, not a gentleman. He didn't have a hat.
He didn't have a hat on.
Right.
It's crazy. Who is this beast? He's terrible.
Yeah, so the stare down ends chapter 3.
Yes.
And then we get into chapter 4.
Yeah. So in chapter 4, mysteries abound. Who is the man on the roof? And how could mild-mannered Miles have been kicked out of school? And who the hell was in the window?
Yes. Things start picking up pretty quickly in this book, especially in chapter 4.
So things are just like happening. So she runs in the house. She can't figure out who this man is. Then Miles still continues to be the sweetest little angel on earth.
Right. So she's more confused.
Right.
Yeah. And she questioned, she was like, was there a secret at Bly? A mystery or an insane or an unmentionable relative kept in unsuspected confinement? So she's questioning, she's starting to get suspicious and paranoid because she knows that this person that had a stare down with her does not belong in this manor. Is it somebody that broke in? Do they have some creepy relative that they're keeping locked up for some reason?
That's a funny theory that they have. She's like, some dude ran in this place, went upstairs, stared at me, and then he left.
Yeah.
What a creep.
Yeah.
But then there's the one of the kind of creepy relative because she's looking at him and she's trying to place his face and she's going, that's not whoever. That's not the landscaper. That's not the groom. That's not the old pony. You know?
Yeah,
I know the old pony.
Right.
You know, something is up here. And so she just kind of can't get it out of her head for days after that. She can't stop thinking about this figure.
I mean, I would be suspicious too. I mean, if I saw a stranger there, of course I would. There is this moment in between this and towards the end of the chapter where she says, of course I was under the spell. The wonderful part that is, even at the time, I perfectly knew I was, but I gave myself up to it. It was an antidote to any pain, and I had more pains than one. And this is how she felt about Miles. And it's weird that she's introspective. So I guess the thing to explain about how this is written is this is a manuscript of the governess. So this is Douglas reading her accounts of what happened. So she can kind of self-reflect back on as she's telling the story. So I think it's funny that she knew that she was too infatuated with this boy, but she gave herself over to it because it felt good.
Yeah, after she's kind of pulled from the manor, she realizes that this was all really weird.
Right.
I don't know why. I just wonder if we ever go back to the party where they're like, boo.
Right. I'm waiting for it.
Stunk.
Right.
Dud. So she kind of goes through this whole thing and she's freaked out about this guy and she realizes that she's drunk on the manor. So then it's Sunday and it's time for church.
Specifically.
And so they have dinner and they're about getting ready to go walk to church. She's like, where are my gloves? I need my gloves. And so she's looking for her gloves. And when she's like, I knew where I left the article of clothing. They were on the chair. And, right. And then she walks into the room where the gloves are. But in the window is the man who is on the roof now staring at her.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
That would scare anybody. Like, it just is stranger danger. In the window, you don't know who he is.
And she says his face was close to the glass, yet the effect of this better view was strangely only to show me how intense the former had been. On the spot there came to me the added shock of a certitude that it was not for me he had come there. He had come for someone else.
That's interesting. So I'm curious what that means and how she knew that. Like, is this her self-reflecting because of what we're going to find out later? Or was the way he was looking at her was more of like, oh, I wasn't here for you, but like, bye.
Move!
Yeah. Not you.
Get out of the way.
Right.
Governess.
Right. Yeah. And then so she gets some balls and she runs out there.
Let's go.
Right. And she was like, I need to confront this. What else am I supposed to do? I need to protect the children. This is my job. This is what I'm here for. She goes out there and of course he gone. He vanished. And so she goes into the window to see what he was looking at, just to see like what his viewpoint was or maybe what he was trying to look at. And then of course, This is a little funny. Miss Gross comes into the room, and then she gets scared just like the governess just did. And so then Miss Gross comes out. So you have...
She's like, WTF? Right. What are you doing, lady? Right.
Yeah, and she was like, I wonder why she was scared. It's like, because you were creeping in the window.
There's an episode of The Twilight Zone called Terror at 30,000 Feet, starring the one and only William Shatner.
Right.
And that episode scares the crap out of me every time, even though I know it's coming. That jump scare is coming when he opens the plane window. Mm-hmm. That creature is going to have its face pressed up against that window.
Right.
And so that's the same terror.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
I know that fear.
Yeah. And this chapter ends with her coming out there.
Yeah.
And then she's confused. The governess is confused why Mrs. Gross was scared.
And so chapter 5, the only thing I have written is, he's a ginger!
Right, because this whole chapter, which is a very short chapter, is Mrs. Gross and the governess talking about who this person was in the window.
Yeah. So she goes to be like, who was he? Like, what are you talking about? And she's like, I know this face. It's the same guy that was on the turret. She says he has red hair, very red, close curling, and a pale face, long in shape, with straight, good features and little, rather queer whiskers that are as red as his hair. They say queer a lot in this.
Right.
And I'm almost offended every time.
No, it's the time.
My aunt, she says queer a lot. She goes, oh, that's queer. That's queer.
That's like a very Queens, New England thing.
Queer.
Queer.
They add an AH at the end of it. And then his eyebrows are somehow darker. They look particularly arched and as if they might move a good deal. His eyes are sharp, strange awfully, but I only know clearly that they're full of wrath.
Yeah, so she sees this angry-looking ginger. I kept picturing Pennywise in the window.
No! Another one of my greatest fears.
Right. And yeah, so she's describing this person. He obviously looks super angry. He's a ginger. He has like a coat on.
But it's not his coat.
It's not his coat. And that's when Mrs. Gross pretty much tells her that it's Quint. Peter Quint.
PQ.
Mm-hmm.
Bequeasy.
Yeah. He's an old man, his valet. So, but she speaks in the past tense. Mm-hmm. So this man was the uncle, the guy that owns the house, valet. Mm-hmm. And he used to put his clothes on. It seems really creepy. Like, she doesn't specify that the guy let him borrow the clothes. Like, he would just put on the dude's clothes. So it's just weird. I guess he wanted to look more fancy.
You know what? It's like he's a creeper. And I think that's it. It's like he didn't have the means to wear the clothes he needed to wear. So he would just take the uncle's clothes and wear it when he was on his job.
Right. And then that's when Mrs. Gross drops the bomb of PQ is dead.
Yeah.
Like how are you seeing this person? He's dead.
He D.
Yeah.
He D-E-D dead.
So it's just spiraling for me.
Yeah. They're just outside of the window, just like freaking out. They're just screaming at each other. He had red hair. Here's Peter Quint. Where is he? He's dead. Ah. Where are the kids? Who knows?
It's twilight time.
Flora and Miles. They're just getting ready for church. Like, are we going to church or what?
Right. And so since these chapters are so short, it breaks up in the middle of conversations. Mm-hmm. And I could not imagine, I'm assuming it's broken up like this because like how we talked about in the beginning, how there were weeklies.
Right.
That came out in the weekly newspaper. So for this conversation to be broken up and having to wait a week, I mean, I read comics, so I get it, but not in the middle of a conversation.
Well, but imagine, though, your cliffhanger, though, for that week is...
He's dead.
God knows where he died.
Right.
End.
Right.
Oh.
Right.
When is the next Collier's Weekly coming out? Next week?
Right.
I have to wait another week. Yeah. So, I mean, Henry James knew what he was doing as far as that, getting readers to come back. But, you know, when you're reading it in succession, it doesn't really have that effect. So chapter 6, the governess and Mrs. Gross lock themselves in the schoolroom to freak out about the apparition. And then another form appears by the pond, and Flora makes a boat.
Yeah.
So they're like, we're not going to church.
Right. We're too frazzled.
We're spooked.
Right.
Quint's back.
Yeah, and they go to a private area to talk about this because they don't want to freak out anybody or the children or anything like that. And the governess asks about his death. Reasonable. Well, how did this dude die? Perhaps Miles knows, but Mrs. Gross says he was too young.
Yeah.
To remember.
Well, there's also this thing where like the governess has this epiphany. She says he was looking for little Miles. A portentous clearness now possessed me. That's whom he was looking for.
So she's speaking as reflecting back. Am I taking that right?
No, she's literally talking to Mrs. Gross, because remember when she has a realization, she's like, he's not looking for me. I know he's not looking for me. And then something tells her that, wait a minute, I know who he was looking for. He was looking for Miles. We'll see in the next chapter. Well, no, in this chapter.
Yeah, it's this chapter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, she also, so while they're talking about this, I get Miss Gross tells her how he died.
Yeah.
And I guess he had some vices, so, I mean, he was just drinking a little too much.
He was a bit of a louse.
Right, and it was a catastrophe, and he slipped and fell on ice and cracked his head open, and then they found him later.
Yeah.
Sad. Super sad.
But he also sounded horrible. Like, he wasn't a good guy.
Yeah, the woman before, her predecessor, they apparently had some type of relationship, or it wasn't clear, right? So
I think he liked to touch her petticoats.
I think he was more aggressive or harassing, and she didn't like the advances. And so people didn't really like him at the manor. And so when he died, I guess that is also kind of sad because nobody really cared about you in the first place. So he's kind of sitting there, turning into a PQ pop.
A little icicle.
Yeah.
Quinsicle.
Little red pop.
Little ginger.
Yeah.
Little ginger cherry pop.
Right.
So they have this whole conversation, and they're like, okay, well, we know who it is. We know how he died. I mean, I have to keep caring for the children.
Right.
And that's it. That's that conversation. So then she continues caring for the children, and she decides to go for a walk on the grounds with Flora one day. And one of Flora's favorite areas is this pond. And Flora pretends that it's the sea, and she's having an adventure.
What does she call it?
The Lake of Azos or something like that?
The Sea of Azoth.
Azoth, yeah. So it's just all pretend. And so the governess goes with her, and she's sitting there. And then she says, there was an alien object in view, a figures whose right of presence I instantly, passionately questioned.
I freaked out at first because the use of alien. I have an irrational fear of aliens. Like, I'm not really scared of them, but I get scared when I see them.
Like if you like the kind of groovy Lisa Frank green aliens with the big black eyes, Noah is not a fan of.
No, I don't like it. Signs, can't watch it.
One of the best movies.
Yeah, I don't know. I saw the part before I was able to watch the movie of that alien walking by, and I was like, no.
That's one of the best parts.
Right, and it's the worst part for me. So, but when I first heard that word, I was like, if I swear to God, if these are aliens, but they're not.
They're not. And then we have this moment again that says, within a minute, all sounds from her had previously dropped. And in the second, by the circumstance that, also within the minute, she had, in her play, turned her back to the water. So Flora sees the figure.
Yeah, she's looking out there.
And she just goes quiet and turns around. And
it brings us into the next chapter.
So chapter 7, the governess just keeps yelling about the woman by the lake, and Mrs. Gross is like, chill.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because so now this is the second sighting of a different figure, ghost or stranger. And she realizes that Flora saw it, but didn't say anything, acted no way. And so that freaks her out, freaks the governess out, because she's like, wait, they know.
They're used to this.
So what the hell's going on?
They say PQ, they see Lady by the Lake,
right.
And they're just like, okay, girl, bye. See you tomorrow. Bye.
Right. Yeah. So so essentially the kids are fine with toasts. And that's
and that's the thing about the boat, is that at the end of that chapter, the little girl turns around, she sees the ghost, and instead of freaking out, she just picks up a little piece of wood and starts to make a mast. for a little boat for the lake. And it's like, she's like, I'm just going to keep playing because that's just that lady. So whatever. And so the governess is, like you said, is just like, bonkers cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. How could they be fine with this? And Mrs. Gross is like, girl, chill. Why are you freaking?
So this is where I also get a little weirded out. And I feel like, obviously, Mrs. Gross isn't letting all the information out because she asks her again, have you seen her before? Mrs. Gross asks the governess that. And she says, she looks familiar. I'm not sure. But then it comes to find out that it was her predecessor.
Yes.
It was the nanny before, or the governess before.
Miss Jessel.
Yeah, Miss Jessel, but she's dead.
Also dead.
So, which is weird because if PQ died on the grounds, makes sense that a ghost is there. But Miss Gross said that she left and then died.
Yeah. And there's also this thing of like, the governess is like fighting herself on this thing. So she yells at Mrs. Gross. She's like, just ask Flora. And then within a second, she's like, no, don't ask her.
Right.
She gotta lie.
Well, but this is what I was hinting at later. You're seeing the governess think that now the kids are in cahoots. That they know about this and they're not giving all the information. So she's she's starting to get paranoid of the kids.
She don't trust anyone.
No, she doesn't.
Well, I mean, put yourself in the governess's fine late 1800s shoes. Petticoat. You're seeing these apparitions.
Right.
They're freaking you out, but nobody else is freaking out. What do you do?
Yeah, it seems it's weird because Mrs. Gross seems like she's freaking out a little bit, but then being like, "Oh no, it's just this person. They're dead, but it's just this person. It's fine.
It's fine.
Go take care of those kids. The kids that are just fine with toasts."
Right. What?
What's happening?
I don't understand.
Right.
I don't understand.
Yeah, and then that's where we're cutting off on this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to split these up somehow,
She's just in the throes of madness.
Right. So this book obviously moves a little quickly. So since it's a short story, so we're starting to see some ghosts. We're starting to get some answers, but also more questions.
So what's nice about how fast it's moving is that we're kind of getting these like back-to-back creepy moments because although we're like kind of laughing about them now, for me, at least personally, I got goosebumps when I was reading them. They make them really creepy with them staring at them and how they're just sort of lingering there.
The one that I got creeped out with was the lake one. That was the one that creeped me out a little bit because just the way he described this figure and how she was feeling, and then seeing Flora see it and then turn around and be like, oh, well, it's like, oh, okay. Yeah. Kids in horror stories are never okay.
Oh, creepy kids.
They're never okay.
Yeah.
Right.
100%.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see where this goes. I'm excited to see what happens more often. Because I'll talk about it when we get into the episodes and we talk about the Haunting of Hill House a little bit, but I read the Haunting of Hill House and it's not like the actual book itself. I didn't find particularly scary.
Right.
So I'm excited to see this sort of older work kind of hold up and have a little creep factor to it. So that makes me happy.
Yeah. I'm excited.
Yeah,
I'm excited
me
for
too.
Both.
So we have created another segment here.
Oh God.
Very similar to Edward's.
He had to find it. He had to find a way.
But we're calling this Mrs. Gross's Glossary.
Right.
I'm going between that voice or like Mrs. Gross's Glossary.
Why not both?
Why not both? Okay,
Yeah.
I'll switch. So the reason we're calling it Mrs. Gross's Glossary is we see that when the governess gets the letter, she hands it to Mrs. Gross and starts to say a couple of words that are maybe sort of Ed words that are a little more advanced, and Mrs. Gross doesn't know them.
Right. So she's not as red as obviously the governess.
The governess.
Right. So now we're acting as if we're Mrs. Gross and not understanding.
Chill out, I'm Mrs. Gross. I don't know what you're talking about. Right. I don't know why she sounds like a lunch lady from Queens, but I like it.
She sounds like the woman from Recess.
Yes!
Show.
I loved her. That show was so good.
Yeah.
One Saturday morning. So our first word in Mrs. Gross's Glossary, I went right back to Edwards.
Yeah.
Is sinecure.
Ooh.
It's a noun. An office or position that requires little or no work and that usually provides an income.
Oh my God, I want that.
Right?
What do I want to be when I grow up? A senator.
Yeah. You want, basically, I think it's like an heiress or something like that.
Right. It seems like the uncle, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, he just can hire a bunch of people.
I think he's just like in India or something like that, right?
Yeah, he's not in the house.
It's when you're
I hope not.
an old pony. It's when you're the old pony.
Right.
So our next word is certitude. So this is an adjective and it has two meanings. It's one causing amazement or wonder, or it's something that's extraordinary in bulk, quantity, or degree. Something that's enormous.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I think it has to do with the house, like either her looking at the house or feeling like the house is amazing.
The house has a lot of bulk.
Ooh, she hefty. So our next word in the glossary is interlocutress.
That sounds fake.
So it's a noun. So it's actually the female form of the word interlocutor, which is one who takes part in a dialogue or conversation.
But it's just a female that does it?
Well, there's an interlocutor, like you'd call a man in a conversation an interlocutor, and
Right.
you'd call a woman in a conversation interlocutress.
That sounds fancier.
Yeah.
Oh, girl.
Our next word is...
Is there a gender neutral version?
Let's make it right now. Interlocutrix.
Mm.
Just put an X on the end of it.
There you go.
How about that? Take that, 1898. Our next word is maculation.
Oh.
Oh, no, that's wrong. Matriculation. I don't know. So this is a noun, and it's an opening between the corbels of a projecting parapet or in the floor of a gallery or roof of a portal by discharging missiles upon assailants below. So this is...
I have no idea what you just said.
For real?
Yeah.
Oh, so it's kind of these spaces between bricks in like the balcony or the turret. So this is when she sees him up in the tower, and he's like moving his hands on the balcony. It's between the maculation.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I saw that word in there. I was like, I hope this isn't like prudent to like the creepy factor.
I'm not getting how scary this is.
Because I don't get what that word
I don't
means.
know. Does that mean his eye is hanging out? Is he a zomboid?
Right.
And our final word in Mrs. Gross's glossary is edifying. It's an adjective. It's instructive or informative in a way that improves the mind or character. So it's like edifying humor is funny, but also makes you quite learned.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
Yeah. So those are Mrs. Gross's glossary words. Yay.
We found a way to make this somewhat educational.
We like education.
Right.
Words are important.
As Derek is a librarian, so I mean, it's always good to, help
I do.
with the reading.
I will say that just even in my past, like I have the dictionary.com app downloaded on my phone, and always throughout my life, whenever I've seen a word in a book, I always look it up if I don't know it.
Oh, I'm not like that. I'm just like, oh well,
I'll figure it out.
Right. I'll never use this in a sentence, so let's hope I'm not on Jeopardy and this comes out.
So thank you guys so much for joining us for Season 2, Episode 1 of A Bite of The Turn of the Screw.
Which will lead into The Haunting of Bly Manor.
Dun, dun, dun.
We got to make October Scoopy. Man, spooky.
We do love Tostito scoops.
I did just have a lot of chips. All right, bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to A Bite of, artwork and editing by our own Noah. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Instagram at A Bite of Pod and on Facebook at A Bite of. If you have questions, recommendations, or just want to say hi, you can email us at abiteofpod@gmail.com. You can find us on all podcast platforms. Please be sure to rate and review to spread the word. Hope you join us next time on A Bite of. Bye!